Aloha. Welcome everybody out there in Zoom land. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm the artistic director at Honolulu Theatre for Youth, and I'm super excited to be joined today by three members of HTY and part of the creative team that put together our project Stories of Oceania. So we have Moses and Pauai and Chesley, who are all here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves more thoroughly when they are each taking a little piece of this conversation we're going to have today. But our hope is just to sort of let you take a look inside a project that we have been working on for a long time, and has been out there actually in the digital universe for a while now. If you look in the chat, actually, you will see that there is a link that this is a special Hawaii Book and Music Festival weekend, because we are making this whole digital production available to you and our entire community at no cost this weekend. So you can follow that link directly to the site. So if you want to see the show and not hear about the show, you can go watch the show now and come back and watch the recording of our panel. Or if you've already seen the show and you want to stick around for the panel, or if you want to just learn a little bit about the creators and then go and check out the show later, that is a special offering that's available to you. I'll tell you just a little bit about HTY as a way to get started. We're an organization that started around 1955, so it's been going quite a while. And we, like so many, have been doing theater and we're in the business of gathering people together in a space. And then COVID happened, and now we've had to figure out how to support our community. And our community really are teachers and families and children here in Hawaii. We consider ourselves a theater of place, and place, as you'll hear from Moses, was really important for this particular project that we were thinking about and putting together. But just to let you know a little bit more, we decided to really quickly to move towards creating digital productions. And one of the things that I think is the most special about HTY is that we have an ensemble of professional artists that are a resident ensemble. So each member here below and many more are part of the HTY company. And so a lot of what we do is we create work that's for this community, from this community, and it comes out of our ensemble. And the piece that we worked on, Stories of Oceania, was a devised piece that was very much in that vein of work. We're also producing a television show, a 30-minute television show across the Hawaii News Now networks. It's called The Highway, and we were lucky enough to win a few Emmys in our first foray into television and into media work. And then we've got some exciting media work coming up across a bunch of different kinds of avenues. And so I think this is an exciting time for us. We're going to be looking specifically at one of our projects, but I think as an organization, we're really interested in being in conversation more about how a group of theatrical storytellers is really becoming a group of storytellers, and what that means across many different means of communicating, and what is theatrical around different medium. And so those are some key questions that we're going to kind of dig into today. But with all that said, I think the appropriate place to start is actually just to show you a little trailer of the piece, Stories of Oceania. And so you get a feeling for what in the world we're talking about. So give me a moment while I get this queued up here. And let's see. Okay, Oceania. Shoot. 1 second here.
My mom said that Oceania has...
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna have to do this slightly a different way. Our best laid plans. Okay. Here we go. Okay.
My mom said that Oceania has many stories, more stories than you can possibly imagine.
She sat with the bird every night, until she learned everything about navigating.
Home is what's up above. Home is what's down below.
The stars and the wind and the sea currents to help them find their way. I should probably tell you exactly what Oceania is.
But my mom says now is the perfect time to remember our connections. It's time to share our stories again. Share our stories. That's it.
Great. I hope that worked. So with that said, sharing our stories, that's really what this project is about. I'm going to turn it over to Moses. This started with one idea of sharing a story in a certain way with a certain community and transformed completely. So Moses, why don't you take it away? Tell us about the project. Tell us about how it got started and how it was developed.
Yeah, so sharing our story, sharing the stories of Oceania. For those of you who don't know what Oceania is, who haven't seen the show, and I hope you will see the show if you haven't, the way we've defined it in the show is that Oceania is the Pacific Ocean and all of the people and the islands within the Pacific Ocean. So that's what Oceania is, which is a lot of people. Now, talking about developing or creating the show, we have to go back, I think, at least 4 or 5 years. So every 4 years, the Festival of Pacific Arts takes place somewhere in Oceania, somewhere in the Pacific. So in 2008, I went to the Festival of Pacific Arts in the Solomon Islands. And that is a huge gathering and celebration of all the people in Oceania. So this is thousands of different people that come from all over the place to share their art, to share their stories, to celebrate the connections and similarities that we have with each other, and also talk about the differences that we have between each other. So that took place in the Solomon Islands in 2008. 2012, it took place in Guam. And at the Guam celebration, at the Guam Festival of Pacific Arts, that's when it was decided that the next one to happen, which would be 2020, would take place in Hawaii for the very first time. So we were going to have this huge celebration of all the people of Oceania right here in Hawaii. And when we heard that in 2012, we decided at HTY that we were going to create a show to go along with that, to be a part of that celebration. And that's sort of how we work at HTY. We come up with an idea for a show 4 years sometimes before the show even happens, right? And then we kind of put it aside and we don't think about it for a little while. Then when it gets closer to the time when the show is going to happen, we start working on it. We start researching it. We start talking and having conversations about it, which is how this was supposed to have taken place. But then the pandemic happened, right? And so we didn't even know if we were going to do the show or not, because live theater just wasn't happening in 2020. But then, as Eric said, we sort of switched to creating shows in a different way. So it's not live shows. We create digital shows that can be seen on your computer screens. And we decided, hey, we're going to do Stories of Oceania. Great. Now what do we do? Because we didn't have, as easy, we couldn't really contact as many people as we wanted to in terms of the people from the many different places of Oceania. And we couldn't meet with them in the way that we wanted to meet with them, even though we did make use of Zoom. So what we did, and what we sort of decided from the beginning anyway, was to focus as much as we can on our little portion of Oceania, which is Hawaii, because this piece was created by the 4 of us. I was sort of the lead writer, but it was myself, Po'ai, Maki'ile, who's not here, and Sean Chu, also. So the four Hawaiians telling the stories about all of Oceania. So we don't come from all of Oceania. We just come from this little part of Oceania. So we wanted to kind of focus on, or at least tell the story more or less from our point of view, our perspective, which is what we ended up doing. And then finding really creative ways to do that in a digital way, which Chesley is going to talk about in a little bit. But that's sort of how we we ended up moving forward and creating this piece that we're very proud of. And again, I hope you're able to take a look at it. And yeah, that's sort of in a nutshell how this piece came to be. I miss anything, Eric?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a beautiful introduction to the project. I'm gonna work on sharing screen again and see if I can be successful. I'm gonna show you another little clip, which gets a little deeper into the project itself. This is sort of the beginning of the story, and I think will set up for how this piece was shot.
Pula, Ali, Yokwe, Yaurana, Talofa, Ranani, Kia ora, Aloha. 8. I now know 8 ways to say hello. Fijian, Palauan, Marshallese, Tahitian, Samoan, Chukis, Maori, and of course, Hawaiian. I'm doing great, but I've still got a long way to go. So many hellos. Should probably explain exactly what it is that I'm doing here, and more importantly, why. I should probably also introduce myself. My name is Kapili, and I've committed myself to memorizing every possible way of saying hello in Oceania. I should probably tell you exactly what Oceania is. Oceania is kind of complex and pretty hard to fully explain, but I'll do my best to give you a good definition. Oceania is the Pacific Ocean and the people that live in it. That didn't sound very complex, did it? But it is. It really, really is. Trust me. But before I get into just how complex Oceania is, I should probably tell you about why I decided to give myself the task of learning all the different greetings of Oceania. It's because I did not like Oceania. There, I said it. I know, I live in Oceania, yet I didn't like Oceania. What's that all about? It's weird. Don't judge me. I'm just being frank here. Frank. I love using that word. It's kind of like saying you're being honest, but with much more enthusiasm. Plus, it's so much more fun to say. Frank. I love words. No, really. I love all kinds of words. Big words, small words, silly words, serious words. Aloha vo ina hua olelo apo. Did you catch that? I just told you that I love words using words from another language. Hawaiian. I probably should have told you that I can speak Hawaiian. Well, I'm not super totally absolutely fluent, but I'm pretty good and I'm getting better every day. I believe the word is conversational, which is another word I love because it sounds exactly like what it means. I'm able to have a conversation in Hawaiian. And that's all thanks to my mom. My mom's amazing. We've been all over the world together. When I was really young, she was in the military, and after that, she worked with a bunch of different aid organizations to help people put their community back together. She even named me Kapili, which means to put together. But even though we lived in different places, my mom always made sure to teach me about my culture and my language so that when we moved back to Hawaii, I'd feel connected to my community.
Great. Yeah. So that's a little piece of the show. It's the beginning of the show. And I think it captures two interesting things that we wanted to talk about. But I want to pass it over to Chesley, because I think, you know, there were some practical limitations, but there also were, you know, some aesthetic possibilities. And you see that the film was definitely shot in a, you know, a very aggressive style in some ways. So I'd love to, how did you figure it out, Jess? How did you decide how this film was going to be shot, and where theater and film kind of intersects?
Yeah. So I've sort of toggled between film and theater for most of my career and in my education. I was at HTY for quite a while as a designer, pre-pandemic, and kept pushing us towards more media content, because I have a master's in scenic design, but before that I was a film school dropout. And so there was the part of me that always wanted to return to that, and to find ways to blend those two worlds. And actually I was attempting to do a PhD when the pandemic hit, and in my research topic was actually trying to combine some theater and film and research. So anyway, when HTY started doing this, I knew I had to come back and get involved. So this was the second of the two digital captures that I worked on after Duke. And Duke was a show that already existed. So we learned a lot. I mean, that was a one-man show with Moses that we had staged several times, and so we knew it well. But we started finding some interesting things in the way we shot it. And when this show then came up next, we really wanted to push those even further and see how we could take that aesthetic for a show that had never existed as a stage show. And so without those thoughts, but create a piece that was still a theatrical piece, just a theatrical piece that was made for a camera. So I'd like to throw it back to when I was a film student 20 odd years ago, freshman in the Intro to Film Studies class. And the professor shows a clip from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And it's a scene in a saloon and lots of stuff going on. And the scene ends and he goes, okay, describe the saloon to me, or, you know, what's the map of the saloon? And like some kids came up and did the chalkboard, and like, you knew that he wanted something specific and no one was going to give it to him. And then after he let some people try, he's like, okay, there is no saloon. And the kid in front of me, dressed like Indiana Jones, sitting in class reading manga all the time, goes, oh, great, thanks for getting all existential on us. And, you know, his point about there is no geography in film except like what you create through cuts and through eye lines and through the grammar of film. Like, it was a good lesson, but I don't know that it would have stuck with me without Indiana Jones in front of me, like labeling it existentialism. So for whatever, that's been kicking around in my head for 20 some years. And so I started thinking, like, you know, the beautiful thing about theater is that the world is what you create and an object is what you say it is. And so we could really push that, like, by building everything around the table and the table becoming the world. But then you take that and you marry it to this power of film, where shot or bits of a scene can be shot in 3 different corners of the world. And if you follow film grammar and edit together, you would never know, because the geography is created in the edit. And so that was really what we talked about pushing in this production, of like, to create this theatrical piece, but where the audience was the camera rather than the audience. So yeah.
Beautiful, Chesley. Thank you so much. I think it's you know, there's been so much innovation around this time, in terms of what is possible. And I really appreciate just having a group of creative individuals who are a team and are each have been asked to push on their own process, I think in this time over the last couple of years of pandemic. And so that was really one of the reasons I wanted to bring this team to the Hawaii Book and Music Festival, where, I think ideas and art forms are really interrogated in a really meaningful way. And to look at, kind of how Chess is doing that. I'm going to play another clip now, and you can sort of see a little more of all the different medium that Chess is working in. He is a puppeteer and an animator, and there's a lot of different types and ways of telling stories in this production. And so we sort of leaned into that. And so this next clip is going to show one of the stories. The students in the piece end up sharing stories from their experience, both from their culture, but also just from their personal experience that each of them wants to bring. And they share that in a way that is meaningful to each of the students in this piece. And so I'm going to play this clip, and then I'm going to have Poi talk a little bit about how we as a community of storytellers came together and collaborated to bring this thing to life. So here we go. Bear with me again. Cross your fingers, and we'll see what happens. Okay. All right, you see that? Great.
My name is Pun, and I like to draw pictures of my home. For as long as I can remember, I have always looked up. Looked up at my mother when I was born, looked up to my father for help, and looked up to the stars. The stars make such beautiful patterns. Looking up always made me feel safe. Looking up felt like home. But then when I was 6, my parents decided to move to Hawaii, so we flew on an airplane. I'd never been so high before. We were above the trees, above the clouds. We were closer to the stars. But when I looked out the window, all I wanted to do was look at Satawal. The shape of it in the water. The patterns that the waves made around it. I waited my whole life to be up, and when I finally was, all I wanted to do was look down. Home. When we first got to Hawaii, I was a little scared. Instead of bird sounds and waves, I heard car horns and buses. Instead of smelling roasted breadfruit and fish all the time, I smelled exhaust from engines. And instead of trees covered with leaves, I saw telephone poles with wires coming out of them. Everything was so different. But different isn't always bad. I started drawing things from my new home right next to things from my home in Satawal. I drew the apartment building that we live in now next to our house on Satawal. A lot of work went into building that house, and many hands from the community helped to cut down the trees and bundle the leaves for the roof. I drew a picture of my favorite place to eat, right next to my dad making my favorite food, pounded breadfruit. There are no restaurants on Satawal, so food making is a big part of daily life. Lots of people gather to cook and prepare things like breadfruit, taro, and fish. And there's always lots of singing and joke telling and laughing. Here's a picture of how we got around. My mom bought our Toyota car so we can travel the whole island. But on Satawal, the island is so small that you can walk wherever you need to go, so no one has a car. And if we want to travel far, we use canoes. The navigators of Satawal can find any island anywhere. But when it came to Hawaii, I found out just how good they really are. People here say that our navigators are some of the best navigators in the whole entire world. I knew they were good, but wow, hearing that made me so proud to be from Satawal. And it made me miss it. My dad missed Satawal too, a lot. He became concerned that I was forgetting our language and our customs. My mom felt we could find success here on this more westernized island, and it would be better for all of us. Mom decided to stay. Dad decided to go back. At first, I was angry and I tore their picture in half. If Mom was here and Dad was in Satawal, where did I belong? But then I started to look back on these drawings, these pictures of home. And then I realized something. For me, home is what's up above. Home is what's down below. And home is what's in between. All at the same time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Junior Tesoro, who's been with the company many, many, many years. Yeah, we wanted to, just as I think these kids were telling their different stories, there was a community of storytellers, all working kind of individually, because at the point we couldn't even be in a shot together. So I'd love to turn it over to Pauai and just talk a little bit about the sort of creative process, the what devising is like, and how it played out here.
Thank you. Yeah. Aloha. My name is Pauai, and I was one of the co-creators of this and acted in this show. And Eric just said we use a very unique process of writing and creating at Honolulu Theatre for Youth of devising, or at least other people say it's unique. I am relatively new to HTY, and most of my experience of creating anything with HTY has been a devising of a play, which I think is a great way to tell stories. And what that means by devising is that it's a group of us. We're all writing multiple portions, multiple pieces, and we come together and read our work together and help each other edit. And what's really neat about it, especially in a story like this, which is so vast. My cat wants to join when she hears me talk, sorry. There are so many stories. There's so many perspectives to come from. And so having a large group of people or more than just yourself to write and create really allows for a vast array of story, not just in the telling of the story that's being told, but how it's told. So when you watch this show and you experience it, you'll see that even the stories that are being told are told in different ways. There's a music video, there's a story that's told like a traditional legend, there's the story of Pun, which is all through artwork and really reads like a poem. So there are all these different styles that came together with the idea of devising, which is one of the amazing things about devising. And my personal favorite thing that occurred while working on this piece is that very early on when we decided we were going to do this was the time we were going to do it. And even though the world was so different and we were having to do all of these meetings via Zoom, something that HTY has always practiced, especially with the devising of a play, is to reach out to experts, to really reach out to the community of the story that we are working on. And so we had these meetings on Zoom with members of our Oceania community that included Uncle Vilsoni, who was just such an amazing storyteller and defender of coconuts and filmmaker, amazing, amazing human. We had Peter Tao of Tao Dance with us. We had Kumu Hailiopua and Auntie Meleana Meyer, to name a few of the people that jumped in with us, just to have these early conversations about what is it that we're doing and why. And that was amazing, because not only were we able to work as youngins, able to work with these like veterans of creating stories, but we also had an opportunity to just hang out with each other, even in a virtual space, to hang out with other creators within Oceania, which was so cathartic, I think was one of the words we used to describe it later. So that's one of the really neat things about creating things, creating this particular piece or writing in this style, this collaborative style, is that you get to work with a lot of people. Some of the tough things and learning while you write is we wrote a lot. There is a Google Drive of folders just bursting with the beginning of scenes or full written scenes that were not used, which is fine. And it was an amazing experience because it allowed just this creative, just writing, just pouring out of ideas. And I think as a very beginner writer, this was the beginning of my writing career, it was an amazing opportunity to help me hone in my voice. So that's one of the great benefits, I think, of writing collaboratively. I could talk for days about this, but I'm not going to. So, Eric.
No, thank you. And yeah, we're happy to talk for days, but we're not gonna. So what we would love to do most, and I just want to invite you now. We're gonna change it up a little bit. I'm gonna ask just get into some different questions. Allow the panel, whoever would like to answer, just kind of answer. I've got a few questions here, but your questions at this point will take precedent over ours. So if you have questions and you'd like to put them in the chat, we invite you to do that. And we'll start out with some of our questions and hope that you populate anything you'd like to know about this project, about HTY or other things. And the first question I'd love to pose to the team as you think what you'd like to know is, we took on this idea of Oceania, which is vast and more expansive. And I just wondered if anyone wants to speak to, how is that term different from thinking about Pacific Islander or Hawaiian perspective? What is opening to an Oceania perspective bring to this project specifically, or mean to you individually?
I'll jump in with that, and just by saying, growing up, I grew up in Hawaii, and I was aware that there were many other islands throughout the Pacific. I knew about them, but I really didn't know that I had any connection to them. There was the term Oceania wasn't used until fairly recently. At least I didn't hear it until maybe just a few years ago. Certainly not growing up. And the whole idea of Oceania and using that word is to view the Pacific Ocean as, some people call it, the blue continent, right? So one big continent, one whole people, right? Which is not something I grew up with. And so just looking at things differently is just it's mind blowing and it's exciting, for me. When I took that trip to the Solomon Islands, I didn't realize how closely we were connected. I remember sharing stories with someone, just randomly going throughout the festival, just making friends and talking about stories of creation, and how so many of our stories are similar, and how we actually we name each other, or at least similar things in our mo'olelo that goes back thousands of years. And it just shows that we came from kind of the same people, and we're cousins. You know, we're one people. And there was a time when there were people going to and fro, you know, the different islands, and could go and visit their cousins in Aotearoa or the Marshall Islands. You know, that was just something that our people did. And it's just looking at it like that just opens my world up to so much more than just our little sliver of Oceania. We are a part of a much larger people. So that's what I'll say about that. And I'll stop talking now.
I'd like to tag in on that. I was lucky to grow up in a household, and both where I was going to school. I went to an international boarding school, so I had classmates from the South Pacific. So I had this wide view of Hawaii's place in the Polynesian Triangle. But those two words I just used, the South Pacific and the Polynesian Triangle, those are the terminologies that I grew up with in school. That's the words that we used in school. And there was a very clear distinction, I remember, in high school for me of switching to Oceania, to calling it Oceania, and this kind of reclamation of this phrase, the unification that comes with the term and the concept of Oceania, rather than calling it the Pacific or calling it the South Pacific or Polynesia and stuff like that, which were terms given to these places through colonization. And so I think the connection that we have, and part of it too for myself is the upbringing with an older sister who's a navigator and a sailor, and so I was taught early on about these connections and given a very clear image from a pretty young age of the road, that the ocean does not divide us. The ocean is a road, and a road that was very constantly traveled in the past. That is not used in the same way quite so much. We're trying to. There are a lot of navigators and people that are trying to bring that back to the norm. But those connections were constant between ourselves and our cousins. And although Hawaii is so far away from everybody else in Oceania, we are very much a part of the story, and it's exciting to create work like this and refine those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wonder if we could just I'll throw out another thought which appeared in the chat. Yeah, thinking about the discoveries or your personal discoveries in the project, you know, through the process of devising. If anyone wanted to, I know you shared some of yours, Pawai, but anybody else wants to share something you take away from this?
I'll just sort of tag on because it sort of comes out of what Pawai was talking about, but it's sort of interesting too, because this is not really even the devising process, because I'm going to share an anecdote with me and the technical director who were not in, who, you know, came in much later. But, you know, just all the stories that we sort of just barely scratched the surface of, like, you know, we were emailing each other like videos of the different types of sailboats from different cultures throughout Oceania, and the similarities and the differences, and like there's a whole story to be told about that we didn't tell in this. But I think, you know, that's always the wonderful thing to me about research, is once you start like trying to learn something, you just learn all the other things you don't know but you want to know. So you know, we got to do another show.
Yeah. No, I think so. Every show we do makes about eight more. So Eden Lee asked, what do you want your audience's takeaway to be from this story? And I kind of have an opinion about that, which I'll roll into another question. And so you can answer that question directly, or I think that one of the beautiful things about this process in the story is, maybe when we started, we did imagine, some, like, oh, a different story from these different places. And what the team really landed on was the stories of these particular kids, and that are living in Hawaii at this moment, and how their culture and their stories, inform their immediate story. And I thought that was really beautiful kind of storytelling, that stories can be ancient and mythic and modern and present all at once. And the beauty of sort of combining those ideas, and the beauty of being curious about people's ancient history, but also their personal history. And so I would love to ask the team about curiosity, and just like the curiosity in each other's stories, and maybe if you want to answer that as well, of what would you like a fifth grader or a middle schooler to take away from this experience?
One of my favorite things about this show is that it really is about kids just talking to each other and sharing with each other. I think a lot of the world that we live in now is we make assumptions based off of the way people look. And unfortunately, the children, they follow the adult model. And if their adults around them make judgments like that and pass judgment, then they're going to do that as well. And they're not going to learn from each other, or more importantly, learn how similar we actually are. We have more similarities than differences. And I think that's something, the underlying current with this particular show was really to talk about how connected we are, how many similarities there are, with all the unique, special, specific stories that were told from each of the cultures that we chose. It's getting to know the humanity of each other, and kind of shedding aside judgment, shedding aside any shame or embarrassment, but just standing up and singing your song, like one of our characters did, which is, I love, one of my favorite parts. And I think to tie in with both Eden's and Roger's question from earlier, as there is so much to be found, and on Chesley, the every candle you light just sheds more candles to be lit, and you realize there's so much more to learn. And I had found myself kind of falling into a little bit of a rabbit hole on my own research of Bikini Atoll and what had happened with the bombing of the islands, and a story that I thought I knew, and I thought I knew the depth of it already, and it ended up just really kind of pulling me more into it, and that became a big part of this show as well when you watch it. And how interesting timing is around the same time we were doing this, I was getting ready to join our ed team, and we were working with middle schoolers, and we wanted to talk about Bikini Atoll. And so I was able to combine these two things. And it was a learning experience for me. And I believe it really did make a difference for the kids that we worked with.
Real quick, thank you for that, Paul. So we knew that we wanted this show to be about how we're connected, and how ways that we are similar. But an exercise that I had us all do early on in the process was sort of focus on how we're different, and actually things that divide us, so we can good and bad, so we can just have that conversation and be aware of the reasons why we don't necessarily connect with certain people that from different places. And so I thought that was very useful. And to me, it ended up, or rather, I hope that in addition to a person watching this show and feeling how we're similar and connected, also be able to celebrate the differences that we have with the person next to us on the bus, right? So that's what I hope that people might take away.
That's so lovely. I think curiosity cuts towards both of those, right? True curiosity, you don't go into that hoping somebody is exactly like you are. or why would you be curious? You hope for some similarities and some differences, and to get in there and learn more. Which I think this team brought out beautifully. Maybe I'm just looking at time, and I thought I'd move over into something a little bit different, and we can pick up some extra questions if we have some time. But I wanted to tell everybody that this project, one of the exciting things about it is, which we never imagined in a million years, is that there has been a real interest. This was a project that was shared at a National Theater conference for theaters for young audiences. There was it was chosen as one of a handful of digital pieces that was shared at the conference, and then from there, people have really fallen in love with it and have really shown a keen interest in this piece, both here in Hawaii and other places. It's going to be the centerpiece of a festival about Pacific Island artistic work in Oregon in November, for families and to zoom in and watch the production. And then these guys will be doing more panel discussions then. And it's also been chosen to be part of a series at the New Victory Theater, which is a Broadway house actually in New York on 42nd Street, which is doing a series of digital work. So through those efforts, it's going to go out and be, it's already played somewhat in different communities across the United States, and it's going to continue to tour digitally throughout the entire United States, which is really exciting to think about being able to share these stories that we built so specifically about this place, that in some ways that has made it universal. And I think the curiosity of communities that maybe don't know about Hawaii, or the communities we're talking about in the piece, have been really interested in the work. So yeah, we'll if you're connected to the HTY social media empire, you will continue to hear updates around stories of Oceania. If you happen to be a teacher, this is my shameless plug. If you happen to be a teacher, we'd love to have this story become a part of your classroom. We've got a lot of educational resources that go alongside it and are connected to it. And even if you're just a part of a community group or would like to use this video in some way, we encourage you to reach out to us and be a part of helping spread the stories. I thought it might be fun to kind of have the team tell you a little bit about upcoming technology work that we're doing, give you some inside scoops into some of the things that we're about to create right now, because of course, having done TV now for a year, we want to see what other kind of trouble we can get into. So I thought maybe I've got each of the team members I've asked to talk a little bit about a project that we're working on. So Moses, why don't you tell us a little something about where we're gonna be in April?
Yeah, so we are we're creating a show that one of our shows is called Imi Aloha, which translates to I guess search and find, and it is a theatrical experience that will be experienced using augmented reality, and it's pretty cool. But we're still figuring out exactly how to do theater using augmented reality, and it's fun. We're meeting with a bunch of different tech people and trying out different augmented reality things like Pokemon Go, which I did for the first time the other day, and it blew my mind. And we're gonna, kind of use some of those things that you might experience on a game like that, and have an experience that you can have on your device, and it's a piece that focuses on the we are a theater of place, and so we're starting. It's going to be the place where we're situated, downtown Honolulu, and the different vahipana, or the storied places around our theater, and an exploration of the different mo'olelo that are there. Yeah. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super cool. We're obviously losing Moses.
I'm gonna
to
go. I'm gonna
to the darkness right now. But this is not a augmented reality trick. No, it's such a cool project, and it's fun to share a little bit of stuff that's in the beginning stages, you know, in the development. So I'd love for Poi to talk about one of the things that we do is, and we have been doing, is working on working with partners around and trying to take important conversations that are happening in the community and make them accessible to families and to young people, and find a way in around those. So Poi did a podcast, so I'm going to have her tell you about the podcast we've already done. And we're now scooping, maybe we're scooping ourselves, but we're going to be working on more of these coming up in the months to come. So Poi.
It's so exciting. So we have this amazing relationship with the SATC, the Sex Abuse Treatment Center of Hawaii. They've been partnering with HTY for a very long time. And we did in the month of April is Sex Abuse Awareness Month. And we released shared to the world the premiere of a podcast called The Respect Room, which I helped create and learned how to make a podcast while making a podcast, which I had asked Eric if I could do, and he was, okay, yeah, let's do the thing, which was really exciting. And it's very powerful. It's very heavy in some senses, but it is really important work to talk about these things, to create a safe space for people to share, and more importantly, to give our youth the tools necessary to deal with the things that they may have to face in their life. So we have four episodes that we created with professionals in the field that are available on SATC's website. They're also on like Apple Podcasts and I think on Spotify Podcasts, which is crazy. And I'm so excited for. And we're going to start the process of our season 2 of the Respect Room, which is really going to be focusing on adolescent voices and their experience in these things. So I'm just thrilled, as you can tell.
Yes, and just a shout out to parents. The first series has some of the most beautiful, kind of conversations. I don't know if it's listening with your child, but definitely how to approach, a teen would be fine listening to any of these, but also just how to approach this sensitive topic. And I encourage you to check them out, but it's cool that we're working in that new way as well. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chesley. And I have no idea what he's going to talk about specifically, but we are doing more episodes of The Highway. And, it's not only a TV show, but it has been a chance for us to experiment in really creative ways and try out new things. He and our technical director just built a jib arm out of wood for the camera. So these little advances and kind of creative research is going on all the time at HTY. So Jess, why don't you pick an idea and pitch something out that they might see down the road?
I think I'm going to start with just what I was filming today, because it's actually in my mind. But sort of an ongoing issue that we have is we use a lot of felt puppets in the show, and also we're in Hawaii and we want to show characters surfing. So I'm not sure, I don't think it was the first time we took puppets to the beach, but we did sort of get a puppet wet today as he was rescued from drowning. And you know, like you can't actually take him out to the surf, but you don't have to fake it all in the studio. So we put him on a ladder and with the surfboard, and so that at least the background was correct, and we'll add some splashes later. And we definitely had a guy coming up the beach go like, "Oh my God, I thought you had a kid up on that ladder. I couldn't figure out what you were doing." You're like, "Oh yeah, no, it's a puppet. We're all good." So yeah, so that, and then I'm excited to push us into some other types of puppetry. We've done shadow puppets a couple times, but I think I'm going to push for a bit of rod and marionette coming up soon. And, you know, someday I'll be able to, you know, run off and do some stop motion, which is my passion, and just doesn't work for the time involved doesn't work for our production process at the moment, but someday it will. So, yeah, anything else we got? Oh, and then just some really strange adventures that our ensemble went through around food waste this past week, which will be airing at some point. And I'm very curious to see how it looks, and I hope it looks really interesting and disgusting. So yeah.
Yes, disgusting in a good way. In a yes. No, thank you so much. I think that's a good place to end it. I was wondering if we could get the link back in the chat again, just so people have it easy in the bottom for where you can go to watch a video. I could probably figure out how to do that too. And then I'm going to ask Roger to come back in and say a bit aloha to all of you. So thank you for having us, Roger. Uncle Billy was actually where we made a bit of that connection on the coconuts, was right here on a Hawaii Book and Music Festival panel, I think last year. So you have a piece of this.
He's a great storyteller. That was, thank you very much, Eric and Moses and Wyatt and Chesley. I can't believe we've known Chesley probably since he was born. But anyway, it was fascinating to get an inside look of the process. We had a couple of ACM showcases, and one simply showed 3 prize-winning videos, and the other one showed how they made game design. And the second one was, I thought, much more interesting because the team did just what you've just done, which was show the process, and they were all so excited about what they were doing, and that just translated into a much better experience, I think, for the audience. Otherwise, if you show just the finished product, you're just watching TV and you're comparing to, 60 Minutes or something. Anyway, I think the way you did it is just excellent, and you have a lot of balls in the air. Hope they all land for you. Thank you very much. Aloha. And attendees, you can catch this on the Better Tomorrow speaker series. And then later we will have a highlights video, which will be up on our website for at least a year. So, aloha. Thank you.
Mahalo. Night, everyone.